The goal of this panel is to identify detrimental loans and credit practices which are often involved in household over-indebtedness cases and define the conditions for granting fair credit, including liabilities rules, were not met. So we've heard about the political and institutional European framework, and now we are going to the real life, the reality, and what is going on in some member state. I think the title is very provocative because cleaning the market from unfair practices and toxic product, it means that we recognize that in our markets there are unfair practices and toxic programs. And I think it's unacceptable that in member states there are legal, I would say in brackets, practices and financial services or entity who makes profits on the back or in some cases on the desperation of people and families. Now, as a European Social and Economic Committee, the consumer groups, as you know, has elaborated several opinions on these issues. Mostly of them are own initiatives opinion. That is to say that for the committee it's fundamental to continuing debating these problems and issues with the other European institutions. I would like also to make a comment and try to give my contribution to complete the study that the Commission just now showing us, that I would also say that we are not talking about poor people that of course are more in a situation of risking about over-indebtedness, but we're talking about the new poors. I think that the problem is that we are losing the middle class in Europe. People who maybe in the past could have made their trip in Maldives or Thailand, and now they just can afford it. And I would also like to add two groups of people in your study, if I can. There is not only a problem of middle class of working people, there is a big problem for pensioners. In my country, in Italy, the other two groups very affected about the over-indebtedness are the pensioners, because of course of the cut of social services and the amount of pension. And the other group is the couples that divorced or split. There are entire new pools of people of this characteristic. Now, what we are talking about unfair practices. We talk about unfair practices where the loans are sold because there is not a good comprehensive information to households. Because there are contractual clauses which are very difficult to understand because they are not written in a comprehensive way for common people. And we can think also about the phenomenon like the revolving product in the retail sectors. But there is also unfair practices when these financial companies or entities, or I don't know how to call this in English, want to have their credits returned back because they really use unacceptable behavior. They are aggressive, they even threats, they make telephone calls at any time of the day or of the night. They put this pressure and psychological pressure just to make the people feel mortified or guilty about their situation of need. For instance, I know that, and someone of you will talk about this, that concerning toxic products, in some countries there are these legal financial entities that provide that the loans should be returned within a deadline, a fixed deadline. Instead, the practice is that the household is encouraged to pay later because the later the loans are paid, the more these financial services earn. So it's, I think, it's going to be very interesting to hear about these experiences and try to also in the debate to find out some possible solution about these problems. So I would like first to give the floor to Mr. Alain Jacob. He's the chairman of the Association of Financial Services Users in Romania. He's chairman. He's also member of the Financial Services User Group, which is an European Commission's expert group on retail financial services and consumer policy, and then he also is member of other high-level expert groups on this issue. So the floor is yours, and please be sticking time around 7 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rondinelli. Thank you very much for inviting me here, for being with you today, trying to present the Romanian perspective on this issue. Let me be. The presentation is about easy credit before crisis and their consequences on consumers. Let me say a few words about macroeconomic conditions in the last years. After the fall of communism, many people wanted to own their house and to buy all modern household electrical goods or even modern cars. But unfortunately, there were almost 20 years of very high inflation compared to EU countries, and I want to give you just some, I think, relevant figures on this. Let me refer to the inflation available in 1993, about 300% inflation. In 1997, 151% of inflation. Many other years with much than 40 or 50 inflation per year. Then Romania is one of the lowest levels of monthly net wages in the EU. It was started in, let me say, I have some figures starting from 2000. It was not much more than 100 euros per month in 2000, in 2001, but even recently we are not we have not an average level of monthly income more than 350, less than 400 euros per month as average. Of course, there are expectations for a spectacular increase of wages after joining the EU. It was the situation in 2006, and a very, very good performance of the local currency in 2006 and 2007, and a very strong economic growth. But this was the reason that retail lending restarted only few years before crisis, in fact in 2006. Consumers with a very low level of income were strongly encouraged to increase their debt through a lot of aggressive mis-selling advertisements and other announcements made by banks. Unfortunately, contracts were made available to consumers only upon the signing. They were not aware about their obligations they are assuming. The language used in contracts almost impossible to be understood by consumers. And when I'm saying consumers, I'm not referring just on average consumers. Also, it was difficult to be understood, I think, by lawyers or by chairmen of banks. Responsible lending was just in theory, unfortunately. And there were huge fees for early repayment. There were fees for early repayment reaching 5%. The most important problem was in 2007 and then in 2008 with loans with introductory interest rate fixed for just 3, 6 or 12 months, and after this period the variable interest rate starting from double or even more. Very high interest rates for local currency, as I've told you before, because partially of the very high level of inflation. And consumers, due to this reality, were tempted by banks and encouraged by them to borrow money in foreign currencies, especially in euro and Swiss franc. But there were no restrictions on interest rates for banks. Most contracts have had abusive clauses. The most frequent one was the bank have the right to change the cost of credit or the rate of interest according to banking market developments without any reference to an index, to a benchmark, to something tangible which could be verified by consumers. Also, before crisis, there were lots of offers for credits just with your ID card. Consumers were also suggested to borrow money for the longest period possible. The official reason for an affordable monthly installment. The real reason, in my view, for a bigger proportion of interest in the monthly installment. In some cases, due to low levels of income and high prices of goods and houses, the longest period was necessary to reach the maximum DTI, debt-to-income ratio. There were also overdraft loans on debit cards, 3 to 6 monthly salaries, or even more, unfortunately. And the crisis hit. Fixed interest rates for limited periods before the crisis becomes variable. A very high increase of monthly installments, as I've told you before, 2 times or even more. The exchange rate for euro and Swiss franc versus RON rose significantly. Let me give you just figures for July. 2007 for euro was 3.13, but in February 2009, 4.28. For Swiss franc, the evolution was even worse. The level in July 2007 was 1.89, and in July 2011, 3.60, almost double. But this was not the only consequences. The government decided to cut off public wages with 25% and to increase the VAT from 19% to 24%, which is available also today. It was a very sharp decrease of the value of houses and flats, because before the crisis it was an asset bubble. A 3 rooms flat in Bucharest was about 150,000-170,000 euros before the crisis. Now it's about 50,000 70,000 euros, just to have some figures in your minds. The central bank, the Romanian central bank, decided to introduce restrictions on lending in November 2008, but unfortunately it was too late. It was like a firefighter coming just after the house was burned, unfortunately. Consequences for consumers: a very sharp increase of monthly installments for credits in foreign currency, a very important, in some cases, decrease of wages, and a slightly increase of unemployment, but also the employment is not very encouraging with those levels of average earnings per month. The decrease of capacity to pay installments in time, of course, a reduction in standard of living, deterioration of some fundamental rights, the rights of dignity, the rights of having a right standard of life. Of course, an increase of financial exclusion, and also home repossession became reality for many people. There are a lot of challenges for consumers. There is no personal insolvency or no personal bankruptcy regime available in Romania, no institutional debt advice, and a very low offer for such services. It is an insignificant level of government spending on consumer issues. There are a lot of problems with enforcement of the EU laws, especially with those that are protecting consumers. Banks are very rarely open to offer good deals to over-indebted consumers. In fact, they are trying just to get the period longer for the credit, which involves supplementary and additional costs for them. There are very aggressive debt collection practices. Daniela Rondinelli mentioned some of them. There are all of them present in Romania, unfortunately. It is no cap for the cost of credit or for APR. Just to give you some figures, and I'll finish very, very soon. Banking consumer credits in Iran these days are between 9.5 and 19.5. Banking mortgages in Iran is a very decreasing rate in between 4.9 and 7.9. And in euro is more or less they are the same figures. Car loans in euros are much higher than here in the western part of Europe, 6.9 to 17.9. But what is very interesting is about small credits for less than 1 year in Iran, up to 100% if the banking transfer is chosen for repayment. If they are coming to your home, there are much more impressive figures. And payday loans in the Romanian currency, the most active provider, between 3,774% and 7,678%. What could be done in my view? Better enforcement of the EU legislation, personal insolvency and bankruptcy law, restriction for abusive practices of debt collectors and a specific regulation of their activity, framework and resources for an independent debt advice, capping the total cost of credit and measures to improve responsible lending. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacob. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Maxime Chipoyi, Head of Studies at the UFC Que Choisir, and he's an expert on revolving credit in credit register in France particularly, bank pricing, frauds on means of payment, and insurances and retail financial products. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais donc vous parler aujourd'hui des problèmes que nous avons connus et que nous connaissons toujours en France concernant les petits crédits aux consommateurs qu'on peut obtenir très facilement. Autrement dit, pour résumer, les crédits renouvelables ou les crédits revolving, pour prendre un terme plus international. Donc aujourd'hui, le crédit renouvelable en France, c'est la première source de surendettement. Expliquons d'abord ce que c'est qu'un crédit renouvelable, en tout cas en France, puisque ça existe partout, mais c'est pas toujours la même nature. C'est d'abord le crédit le plus cher qu'on peut trouver en France, puisque le taux d'intérêt général est généralement entre 15 et 20%. C'est surtout, et c'est un problème bien plus important pour nous, c'est un crédit qu'on peut utiliser pour tout et n'importe quoi. C'est-à-dire que contrairement au crédit classique qui, lui, est lié, en tout cas en France, à l'achat par exemple d'une voiture ou pour faire des travaux, le crédit renouvelable, lui, vous pouvez l'utiliser pour payer vos dépenses d'alimentation, pour payer vos impôts, pour payer vos dépenses de santé. Donc ça, c'est assez problématique puisque au vu du taux d'intérêt, si vous avez du mal au mois de janvier à payer vos dépenses d'alimentation à partir du 16 du mois, si vous utilisez un crédit renouvelable, le mois suivant, c'est à partir du 15 que vous aurez un problème. Et enfin, la dernière caractéristique et le dernier problème de ce crédit, en tout cas jusqu'en 2010, c'était que ce crédit pouvait se rembourser sur de très très longues années et de tout petits montants par mois. Ce qui fait qu'en réalité, plus le crédit augmentait, bien sûr, plus le coût de ce crédit augmentait. Et je vous ai mis dans ma présentation un exemple montrant qu'un crédit de 5 000 € qui était remboursé à coût de 90 € par mois coûtait en réalité 6 300 € d'intérêt pour les consommateurs et prenait 10 ans et demi à être remboursé. Ah oui, pardon. Excusez-moi. Voilà. Oui, non, je le fais, pas de problème. Et avec ce crédit renouvelable, on avait un problème très important puisque il y avait un vrai problème de distribution, en particulier dans les grands magasins, les supermarchés et les grandes surfaces spécialisées. Puisque nous avions fait le test à l'UFC Que Choisir, nous avons organisé une campagne de visite mystère qui montrait, on avait fait plus de 1000 souscriptions de crédit, et on voyait que dans les 2/3 des cas, les vendeurs de crédit ne proposaient que du crédit renouvelable. Donc le consommateur n'avait absolument pas la possibilité de prendre du crédit amortissable, donc du crédit classique, qui lui est beaucoup moins cher puisque le taux d'intérêt est facilement 3 fois inférieur. et qu'en plus, quand on prend un crédit classique, on vous donne que l'argent nécessaire à l'achat que vous voulez faire, ce qui est beaucoup plus sain à notre avis. Et il y avait également un autre problème très important qui était que dans quasiment la totalité des cas, on ne vous posait aucune question pour vous donner un crédit. Ce qui nous a amené à appeler les supermarchés des vrais supermarchés du crédit et du crédit en libre service. Et enfin, il y avait une grande confusion entre les cartes de fidélité vendues par les magasins et les cartes de crédit, puisque dans la quasi-totalité des cas, même un consommateur qui ne voulait pas de crédit renouvelable repartait avec une carte de magasin qui contenait un crédit renouvelable. Le problème n'était pas limité aux grandes surfaces, puisque même sur Internet, il y avait ce problème de choix, ce qui fait que les conséquences pour les consommateurs étaient très importantes, et là c'est toujours le cas aujourd'hui, puisque quand vous prenez les statistiques sur les dossiers de surendettement en France, on se rend compte que la quasi-totalité des dossiers de surendettement contiennent un crédit renouvelable et que, au-delà de ça, ce n'est pas un crédit renouvelable en moyenne qu'on trouve dans les dossiers de surendettement, mais en réalité entre 4 et 5 crédits. On a même des dossiers où ça peut monter jusqu'à 20, 30, voire des records à 70 crédits dans le même dossier de surendettement. Alors en 2010, notre ministre de l'économie de l'époque, Christine Lagarde, a décidé pour accompagner bien sûr la directive sur le crédit à la consommation, de nettoyer un peu le marché du crédit renouvelable. Et donc il y a eu deux grandes tendances qui étaient prévues dans la loi Lagarde. La première, c'est de modifier la manière dont le crédit renouvelable fonctionne, notamment en réformant le taux d'intérêt du crédit renouvelable. Avant la loi Lagarde, les crédits renouvelables, enfin les taux d'intérêt, les taux d'usure étaient définis en fonction du type de crédit. Donc vous aviez d'un côté le crédit renouvelable où le taux d'usure pouvait aller jusqu'à 20% et de l'autre le crédit classique où le taux d'usure était limité à 7 ou 8%. Forcément, les professionnels avaient un intérêt à ne vendre que du crédit renouvelable et pour éviter cette pratique, Madame Lagarde, excusez-moi. Pour éviter cette pratique, Madame Lagarde a décidé de réformer ça et de ne faire plus que des taux d'usure par montant. C'est-à-dire que quel que soit le type de crédit que vous prenez, si vous empruntez 1 000 €, vous avez un taux d'usure maximum. Si vous empruntez 3 000, vous en avez un autre. Si vous empruntez 6 000, vous en avez un autre. Elle a également décidé de mettre une limite temporelle à tous ces crédits pour limiter le coût du crédit. Donc vous avez deux limites aujourd'hui, 36 mois pour les crédits en dessous de 3 000 € et 50 mois pour les crédits au-dessus de 3 000 €. Donc l'objectif, c'est évidemment de limiter le coût du crédit avec une contrainte pour les consommateurs qui est qu'ils ont à rembourser de plus grandes mensualités par mois. Donc la balance est à faire, mais en termes de coût, en tout cas, l'intérêt est certain. Et enfin, et là c'est pour résoudre en partie la question des cartes de fidélité, la loi Lagarde prévoyait que si le consommateur n'utilisait pas son crédit renouvelable au bout de 2 ans, ce crédit renouvelable devait automatiquement s'arrêter. Il y avait aussi un deuxième aspect sur cette réforme qui était de nettoyer la distribution de crédits renouvelables, qui était évidemment un aspect majeur comme je l'ai montré précédemment. Et là, la loi prévoyait qu'il y ait une obligation de proposition d'un choix à partir de 1 000 € empruntés. C'est-à-dire qu'à partir du moment où vous veniez dans un magasin pour dire « je prends tel ou tel produit et ça coûte plus de 1 000 €», le vendeur devait vous dire « vous avez le choix, monsieur, entre un crédit renouvelable ou un crédit amortissable » et le consommateur devait choisir. Et enfin, il y avait une obligation de vérifier la solvabilité du consommateur voulant emprunter à partir de 1 000 €, et notamment en consultant un fichier qui existe en France, qui est le fichier des incidents de paiement, qui permettait de voir si le consommateur avait déjà des problèmes de crédit avant de lui en donner un de plus. Alors sur le bilan de cette loi Lagarde, on a globalement une très grande réussite sur les aspects mécaniques du crédit et un échec assez fort sur les aspects de distribution. Je vais vous expliquer pourquoi. Alors sur les aspects mécaniques, merci. Sur les aspects mécaniques, la réforme des taux d'usure a été un succès assez important puisque désormais on ne trouve quasiment plus sur le marché de crédits renouvelables de montants élevés. Donc, on n'a pas résolu le problème pour les petits montants, mais désormais, il n'y a quasiment plus de crédits renouvelables supérieurs à 6 000 € par exemple, et c'est quand même quelque chose de positif puisque c'est ce qui coûte évidemment le plus cher aux consommateurs. On a évidemment aussi la fin des crédits renouvelables éternels, puisque désormais l'ensemble des crédits renouvelables, et là la loi est vraiment respectée, fait moins de 50 mois pour les crédits les plus élevés. Et ça a des conséquences en termes de coûts également, puisque pour un crédit de 3 000 €, le coût total du crédit a été divisé par 2,5 grâce à cette réduction de la durée des crédits. D'accord. En revanche, on a toujours des problèmes sur la distribution, puisque comme on l'a montré avec une deuxième enquête mystère, les professionnels sont adaptés à la loi Lagarde et désormais ils ne proposent plus directement de crédit renouvelable, parce que ça c'est trop compliqué, c'est trop encadré par la loi, mais ils proposent des 3 fois sans frais, sauf que pour prendre un 3 fois sans frais dans un magasin, vous êtes obligé de prendre une carte de fidélité sur laquelle repose un crédit renouvelable, et s'ajoute à ça un gros problème de démarchage et de sollicitation commerciale, puisque les consommateurs qui ont fini de rembourser le 3 fois sans frais se voient littéralement inondés de courriers de relance pour leur dire c'est bientôt les vacances, payez vos vacances avec le crédit renouvelable de votre carte, c'est la foire au vin, achetez du vin avec le crédit renouvelable de votre carte, ou allez au ski avec le crédit renouvelable de votre carte. Donc, le problème sur la distribution perdure. Nous, à l'UFC Que Choisir, on considère que les cartes confuses mêlant crédit et programme de fidélité doivent cesser, mais il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire là-dessus. Et juste pour terminer, il y a 2 diapositives que vous trouvez ensuite sur le taux d'usure en France, qui est une mesure qui n'existe pas partout, et notamment c'est pas le cas en Roumanie, et qui fonctionne plutôt bien en France, puisqu'on n'a pas de marché noir du crédit, et on n'a pas de payday loans, par exemple. Voilà.
Merci.
Oui, pardon.
Merci, monsieur. Merci, monsieur Chipoi. Je voudrais demander au secrétariat de la INT s'il serait possible, après la conférence, d'avoir le matériel publié sur le site, bien entendu, parce qu'aujourd'hui, on n'aura pas le temps suffisant de lire tous les documents et les slides qui sont vraiment intéressants. Moi, j'ai la copie de toutes les slides, et ils sont vraiment intéressants, plein de détails. Donc, vous aurez la possibilité de lire et d'étudier mieux en détail en ayant les documents sur notre site internet. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Richard Piggin. He's a campaign manager of the financial services of which is one of a very big consumer association in Europe, from United Kingdom. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be quick. I'm going to talk about how we've begun to clean up credit in the UK. So as a bit of background, up until 2007, credit became fairly acceptable in our country. Low interest rates on debt, rising house prices, consumer confidence, and banks who are willing to lend meant that the total amount of personal loans just from banks more than doubled in that time. And then from 2007, with the crisis, there was a reduction in net household income, a reduction in the availability of consumer credit just from banks, and so we saw a dramatic rise in payday loans, so high-cost, short-term credit that was very easily accessible. There was also, at the end of 2012, quite a high amount of personal debt. So if you look at personal debt levels, just in consumer credit, stood at 157 billion, which equates to about £3,000 per adult, but also hides the range. So there were quite a large number of consumers with significant amount of more debt than that. However, looked further down the slide, only 1 in 5 people had no savings. When those events, when they were in times of economic difficulty. So there was little financial security. In January 2013 alone, almost 1 in 10 people defaulted on a loan, bill, mortgage or rent. And around a third of users of payday loans and unauthorised overdrafts reported using the money borrowed to pay for essentials, such as bills, mortgages, food and emergencies. The next slide just shows some of the characteristics, or poor characteristics of the credit market in the UK. There was a failure to conduct full affordability assessments or to share data with credit reference agencies, meaning consumers could take out more credit than they could afford to repay. About half of payday loan users took out credit they couldn't afford, according to our study in 2013. And a lot of payday loans business models were based exactly on that fact. A poor treatment of consumers in financial difficulty, so we're talking about high default fees, interest for long periods after the customer defaults, really just exacerbated the struggling borrower's financial position. And so we saw a spiral of debt, consumers entering into spirals of debt. There's also inappropriate marketing from payday loan companies. There's some examples here, payday loan companies advertising loans for nights out, or even just to put in the bank, money in the bank for emergencies. This led to consumers taking out loans they didn't really need. Also another characteristic, unsolicited increase in credit limits, encouraging consumers to take on more debt than they intended and discouraging consumers from really making conscious decisions about their finances. And then finally, as other people have talked about, a lack of transparency over pricing structures and additional charges that really exploited consumers' overconfidence about their ability to repay their debt in full and on time, pushing the actual cost of credit well above the headline interest charge. Up to 2013, we also had quite a fairly weak regulator in the UK, the Office of Fair Trading. In March 2013, it referred the loans market, the payday loans market, to a competition commission in the UK, and in a very positive step, the regulation of consumer credit was going to transfer to the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, in 2014. So at this time, which intervened in terms of a campaigning angle, and we set out 5 challenges that the new regulator really should do to clean up credit for consumers. These were to ban excessive default charges and fees and introduce a cap on the level and total cost of default charges, to really crack down on irresponsible lending practices, bring in stronger rules for affordability assessments. We wanted them to put people in control of their credit and end unsolicited increases in credit limits, and give consumers clear and transparent information. And one of the things that we have called for and still call for is for high cost credit to be displayed clearly as pounds per £100 borrowed over 30 days. I mean, this would give people the opportunity to really compare the true cost of credit. And finally, swift and early intervention for people in financial difficulty. So, you know, they should come with clear warning signs, prevent lenders from charging interest on high cost loans beyond 30 days after the borrower defaults. This is examples on this slide of the campaign that we ran and we launched. A public-facing campaign, engaging supporters. You can see almost 13,000 consumers in the UK supported our campaign. We used our website, we used the Which platform. There's an example of some of the default fees that are charged up to, you know, the worst offender was a company called Wonga, charging £30 a default fee. And it did engage very well on social media. As you can see, just a small example of that, and some of the content, like our table, was very shareable on social media. What actually led to? So we've had some positive outcomes so far. A bit of tougher regulation. So in October of last year, the Financial Conduct Authority outlined plans to tackle payday loans, answering some of our key asks. In January 2014, as an aside, just as Which, we wrote to all lenders highlighting their excessive default fees. We believed, we challenged them, we believed that they were unfair, or they were against law under the Unfair Terms and Consumer Contracts regulations. Unsurprisingly, we heard nothing back from them. But in February of this year, the FCA did announce some new rules, and they came into effect. They've come into effect already in the UK. There are now, lenders have to undergo stronger affordability checks. The number of continuous payment authorities, so the number of times that lenders can actually go into your bank account and take out money that you owe, is limited to 2, and they can only do that for the full amount. Previously, lenders were able to go into your bank account and try and take out, say, £500, and if that didn't work, take out £400. If that didn't work, take £300, until they could take out what was effectively in your bank account. So that practice has now stopped. The number of times a loan can be rolled over is now limited to 2. We'd like to see it limited to 1. But it's progress in the right direction. And we've seen movement towards a real-time database of lenders, so lenders can see who is applying for credit from each other, essentially, and who's already got debt with other lenders. And finally, in another really good move, just recently in September, we've seen a price cap on payday loans. This will come into effect on the 2nd of January next year. There's a 0.8% cap on the daily interest rates, which is equivalent to £24 per £100 over 30 days, if you use the Which way of presenting things. Default fees capped at £15, so Wonga, who was charging £30, that's been reduced by half. There are still some that will use £12, which is even better. And the total, critically, the total amount to be repaid cannot be more than double the original loan. So it's steps in the right direction. Where next, just very quickly, there are still some of our asks that are still outstanding and still apply, and we'd like to see default fees capped on all forms of credit, such as overdrafts. There are other forms. We've looked predominantly at payday loans. I've looked at predominantly at payday loans here. Our attention will look at loan brokers. New rules are coming in as well next year. Catalogue loans, which we haven't really touched on, and then a big focus will be on credit cards in the UK. So it's we know that there are stats such as over 70% of credit cards in the EU are held by British consumers. We think there are real concerns over minimum repayment levels, and again, the regulator is taking a slightly stronger approach, and will conduct a market study next year. And there's just some more examples of our social content down below. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Piggin. I think we've heard about 3 different experiences at national level, but with we're really the aim to solve the same problems and the same characteristic. I was very impressed by the France experience. We are going to have the same revolving credit also in Italy, and it's going to be also a big problem in my country too. So it's very interesting to know the different experiences. I have some questions before, of course, giving the floor for some questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions. I would like to ask you concerning your experiences in this field and on these problems. Do you think it could be useful to have at European level a legislation that establish a mechanism to regulate the interest rates, and to eliminate the abuse one, as we've heard, and which the extreme one is the usury, of course, but also in a pseudo-legal framework there are also abusive one on other areas. Do you think also it would be needed in European legislation concerning the maximum amount of credit that consumers can ask for? And what do you think about the debt collection made by these private financial services which have the goal to collect the credit? Do you think that they should be submitted to something like a code of conduct or responsibility, behavior responsibility, something like that, because this is becoming also a huge problem for consumers. So I would like now to ask you if there are any questions, comment, and of course, please to be very brief. And also, I would like also to ask you: do you know any positive experience, a good practice of product sold that take into consideration the capacity and of the ability of people to reimburse the loan that they have contract? Do you know any positive experience on this? If so, please tell us. Yes, Mr. Jerusalem.
Yes, about this question of payday loans, I just first of all inform the audience that EFIN is currently working on a study about payday loans, and we hope to be able to finalize and to make it public during the first semester of 2015. And we have checked in these documents many of the practices and regulations that have been implemented in the States because they had these experience, and from a state to another, it's interesting to see what have been implemented and the result that they reach thanks to appropriate measures in order to maintain and to reduce this industry, and especially some elements are very interesting, I think, especially for countries where it's already very developed, because in the UK, for example, the challenge is not to push this activity in black markets, illegal one. So because people are used to get credit and to get money, whatever the price it costs. So I think this is a challenging way to not to increase so much the illegal practices, trying to cap. So about good practice, I just want to mention that French law is quite well designed. We do have quite a well-designed law as well in Belgium, and I think it can be of some inspiration as well for people who want to regulate practices on this kind of bad product. Thank you.
Thank you for this information. Yes, please.
My name is Tony Zsuport. I'm from Hungary, and I'd like to answer directly your question about a positive decision. The Hungarian government has issued two major decisions. One of them is to cut off, to conduct out from the system the loans upon the basis of both euro and Swiss francs, because that was the basis of the disaster of the Hungarian loaning system. The second one is even more important. You believe or don't, the Hungarian parliament has accepted to law to force all those banks which were giving loans anytime, either in Swiss franc and euros or in Hungarian forints, have to pay back all those money which the government thinks was not legal or was not correct. That is to say that all those loans which were consisted of the increasing of the exchange rate or so-called administrative fees, which was not necessarily to be implemented, this law is forcing the banks to pay it back. And we are talking about quite a large amount of money by which several banks in Hungary, coming from foreign side or even the Hungarian banks, are thinking now to leave the country. But they cannot leave the payment.
Is there any other? We can take maybe another observation. Yes, please.
Oui, vous m'entendez mieux. Je voulais réagir à l'intervention de M. Chipoy, qui, je trouve, est en contradiction avec ce qu'on a entendu par les interlocuteurs précédents sur les voies menant au surendettement. Et puis aussi ma surprise de voir traiter le sujet du crédit renouvelable dans les produits toxiques. Vous l'avez rappelé, M. Chipoy, c'est vrai qu'il y a eu une évolution forte en 2010 avec la loi Lagarde, et vous avez beaucoup insisté sur l'avant Lagarde. Moi, je voudrais quand même donner un éclairage sur ce qu'est aujourd'hui la réalité du crédit renouvelable en France, sur les points de vente. C'est d'abord un crédit qui est bien souvent à 75% un crédit affecté. Donc on ne peut pas non plus toujours dire que c'est un crédit, une réserve d'argent qui est utilisée qu'à des fins alimentaires ou de façon libre de la part des clients. Il est bien souvent affecté à un bien acheté au sein du magasin. Ensuite, il faut aussi relativiser. Et c'est bien sûr, vous l'avez évoqué, hein, la loi Lagarde a assaini les pratiques en matière de crédit renouvelable, et c'est tant mieux, on s'en félicite également. Mais aujourd'hui, 80% des achats qui sont faits par ces détenteurs de cartes, selon en tout cas l'ensemble des magasins avec lesquels CTLM, qui est quand même un acteur assez représentatif du marché, payent comptant leurs achats, ne payent pas leurs achats à crédit. Donc c'est aussi des achats qui aujourd'hui, même s'il y a des détenteurs de cartes, qui sont faits donc de façon comptant. Ensuite, ce que je voulais dire également, c'est que les effets de la loi Lagarde, ça a été une clôture de plus de 6 millions de cartes en France, et c'est pas fini. Monsieur Chipoy a oublié également de rappeler qu'avec les effets de la loi Hamon, aujourd'hui les résiliations, les suspensions, puis les résiliations de ces cartes, quand elles ne sont pas utilisées, seront aussi automatiques. C'est aussi un point important pour éviter un dérapage dans l'utilisation de ces cartes. Et enfin, aussi, ce que je voulais rappeler, c'est que l'utilisation aujourd'hui de ces produits crédits renouvelables en France, ça ne représente plus grand-chose. il y a eu une chute de l'utilisation par les détenteurs de ces cartes. C'est 10% aujourd'hui d'utilisation dans les produits de crédit en France. On le voit également, ce matin a été évoqué aussi l'enquête typologique de la Banque de France, y compris dans les chiffres du surendettement. Attention, dans le surendettement aujourd'hui, les dettes de crédit reculent, moins 8 points en 2 ans, quand même, il faut aussi le préciser. Moi, j'ai beaucoup entendu parler aujourd'hui plutôt d'incidents liés à la situation professionnelle ou personnelle. J'en termine avec un dernier chiffre. Et je voulais également rajouter que l'ensemble de ces vendeurs que nous accompagnons, qui ne sont pas tous, j'allais dire, irresponsables, ont aussi une réglementation très forte en France. Ils sont considérés comme des intermédiaires financiers. Ça n'a pas été rappelé aussi. Et donc sont soumis à une obligation de conseil, sont soumis à une obligation aussi de bonne pratique et sont régulièrement contrôlés par des instances de régulation en France pour justement veiller à ce que l'intérêt client et la protection du client soient bien respectés. C'était juste une précision.
C'est une précision, mais c'est très clair que les intérêts des banques ne coïncident pas toujours avec les intérêts des consommateurs. Donc, ces discussions-là, c'est bien intéressant. Donc, je voudrais peut-être d'abord donner la parole à M. Chipoy pour réagir à cette intervention, et puis je vais donner la parole aux autres deux intervenants.
Alors, eh bien, je vais vous répondre. Déjà, je ne comprends pas la notion de crédit renouvelable affecté, puisque par définition, si c'est un crédit renouvelable, ça ne peut pas être un crédit affecté. Et nous, ce qu'on voit, c'est que quand un consommateur demande à payer, on va dire, sa machine à laver et son frigo pour 800 €, c'est 3 000 € qu'on lui donne. Donc à un moment, c'est 2 200 € qui restent, il en fait quelque chose, et ce n'est pas forcément des choses qui méritent d'être payées à crédit. Ensuite, il y a du progrès sur le crédit renouvelable dans les magasins. En revanche, il y a une grande inquiétude de la part du crédit renouvelable vendu par les banques, puisque jusqu'à ces dernières années, les banques traditionnelles ne mettaient pas leurs mains dans le crédit renouvelable, elles laissaient ça à leur filiale. Aujourd'hui, ce qu'on voit, c'est que certains réseaux bancaires, ce n'est pas le cas de BNP Paribas, mais c'est le cas d'autres réseaux, commencent à remplacer les cartes de débit, quand ces cartes de débit arrivent à échéance, par des cartes de débit qui ont aussi une fonction crédit, et très souvent sans poser aucune question à leurs consommateurs, puisque soi-disant ils savent tout grâce au compte courant qu'ils possèdent, ni même les avertir que leur carte a changé de nature. Donc ça, c'est extrêmement problématique, et je pense que c'est une bombe à retardement en termes de surendettement. Voilà. Et enfin, sur le consentement du client, si personne n'utilise ces cartes, autant ne plus les vendre, autant les vendre correctement. Et on a des dizaines de courriers de consommateurs qui qui constatent toujours que leur crédit est utilisé alors qu'ils n'avaient pas mémoire de l'utiliser. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Jacob, do you want to give some feedbacks about the discussion? Thank you.
Yes, of course, and I want to respond to some of your questions. Regarding debt collectors, we are very concerned about their behavior and about what they are doing with consumers, what they are doing for pressing them, about calling them on day and night, on weekends. They are calling relatives, they are calling colleagues from their offices. I want to recommend you a study made by London Economics for the FSUG a few years ago. It was published on our website. It's about debt solutions for people in financial difficulty. You'll find there a lot of solutions adopted in member states in favor of consumers, but also it is a description in the Romanian chapter about some incredible pressures made by some debt collectors to a teacher and her family. Also about capping and regulating interest rates, of course I'm in favor of capping of, but not only interest rates. I think it will be more effective to cap the APR, because also it was the case in Romania. Even the interest rate is capped. The banks have the right to increase the fees, the commissions, and then the APR will increase. Then the effective solution, in my view, is to cap the APR. And let's think about having in mind and imposing a maximum level of the interest rate on the European level. Why? Because in my view it's incredible, and without any explanation, why here in Belgium the ING offers me a car loan with less than 3%. The APR is less than 3%. In fact, it's 2.7, and in Romania, the same for the same car, the level of APR is more than 10. It is around sometimes 17%. I cannot have a proper explanation on this, and maybe we should think about doing something on the European level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pigging, please.
I'd just like to pick up on Olivier's point that it will be a challenge not to push people towards illegal forms of lending. There's some studies that will show the proportion of people who were in debt who would now be better off if they had not taken out a payday loan. And although the strength of the regulator in the UK and the authorisation process that payday loan firms have to go through now with the FCA is much stricter, we don't think it will. A lot of lenders will leave the market, but some will remain. I think it's still important because there will still be consumers that will need access quickly to short-term credit. We'd like just to see, more clear, transparent, comparable information. We think there are some issues with APR in terms of what it means for consumers, how well consumers can understand that, particularly on short-term, high-cost forms of credit. And if you put all of those things together, we're hoping to make the market work fairer and work for consumers. That's not necessarily to say completely eradicate the market, but just make sure it works fairer for them.
Thank you very much. I won't take time for some comments, conclusion comments, because unfortunately we don't have enough time. So what I would say is to thank all the speakers, first of all, for having accepted our invitation to attend this panel, but also for the important contribution you've taken to our discussion here in the Economic and Social Committee.